Get started, everybody. Welcome. This is our Enough to Feed Everyone Food Security for All. And what we would like to talk about today, and we'd like to have a real discussion with our panel here, is a discussion about food security and the importance of food and getting food to a lot of marginalized communities and rebuilding areas using the power of food and feeding of the world. How important it is as food is one of the base necessities for all human life. It's a source of stability in regions, and the lack of food can be the source of instability. So the power to get food to those areas can really be transformational across the globe. And as part of that, we have three wonderful panelists with us today that are going to be talking about that food security and getting food to those communities. We have Loree James Brown, who is not only an Eisenhower Fellowship trustee, but she is also the CEO of Philabundance, which is a food bank, and more so than a food bank, works with coordinating food to marginalized communities throughout this Philadelphia area and sourcing food for those necessary. She was recently in a White House conference for hunger, nutrition, and health, talking about this very issue, as well as testifying for the U.S. Congress on the Farm Bill, the importance of continuing funding for food security within the United States. We also have Heidi Kühn, who is going to be this year's World Food Prize winner, which is a wonderful, very good. She is a Mother Teresa awardee. She's a California farmer, fifth generation California farmer out of Marin County. So that's a long history and deep roots with agriculture. And she's the founder of Roots of Peace, which brings about agricultural development and war-torn areas. And we're going to look forward to hearing a little bit about those efforts of bringing food into those regions. And lastly, but not least, we have Shridhar and Venkat, who's with the Akshaya, Patra, forgive me if I mispronounced it, but they bring food to school children throughout India, feeding over 2 million children a day with fresh food, and that's in, 24,000 different schools, if I remember correct. And it's just an absolute amazing stat for one of the largest nonprofits within that region. So what a wonderful accomplishment. So I think we're going to have a really good panel on discussing this important issue. But really, the key question overall, and we'll start with this, and everyone can answer. I'd like this to be a little bit of a conversation amongst the panel. But really, when we're talking about food security, we'd like to kind of get an idea of what you see as what are the greatest problems that we are facing in global food security, and how do we go about dealing with those problems? Loree, why don't we start with you, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So I'm a trustee and a fellow, and I thought that folks at Eisenhower liked me, but to put us on a panel at the end of a Saturday and to not have espresso in the room, and everything's sort of gorgeous. It's gorgeous outside. I'll pay you all back later for that. But really, and it's interesting. I prepared remarks coming into this, and a day and a half into spending time with fellows, what I have to say is very different than what I had written down to say. And I really have been, my impressions have been shaped and reshaped by this Eisenhower gathering, which I think is what Eisenhower Fellowships are all about. And so I actually want to talk more about the role of government in this work, and that's not where I would have started. So John mentioned that I did have the opportunity with 500 other people to participate in the White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health a year and 2 weeks ago. And it was the first time in 50 years that gathering had happened. And if people think back, 50 or so years ago when that happened, it really is credited. The policies that came out of that were credited with reducing food insecurity across the country. So our food stamps, or what we call now SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, was really born. And with the expansion of the school lunch program, 6.6 million more children got access to food. And so a couple weeks ago, I was feeling incredibly optimistic about what government had been doing. So we've come through this global health pandemic, and what we saw from both the government's response to COVID and trade mitigation is that government really provided much more food to be more food insecure through programs like mine. And so we went from getting a couple million pounds of food from government for 2 years in a row, 20 million pounds of food from government, that enabled us to really double in size in terms of the distributions. We also saw in this interesting moment of COVID, government expanding and supporting people in different ways. So we expanded a child tax credit that was for about a year and a half in this country, which was credited with cutting childhood poverty in half. It's since gone away. We also saw an expansion of the food stamp program that really supported seniors and other folks, and that went away back in March. And so we had this moment where we had government really kind of marshaling support and providing more support to people who are food insecure in really interesting ways. We had this White House conference, and so for a moment I was feeling really hopeful. I'm feeling a little bit less hopeful now, with the exception of having spent 2 days with Eisenhower Fellows. I think there's a real opportunity and a moment for us to think, what can we do in this civil society way? How can we marshal resources, ideas, innovations that we then can encourage government to support? John and I have talked about this. This is the moment of the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is authorized once every 5 years in our country. We're looking at $1.5 trillion with a T, $1.5 trillion investment that government can make to ensure that people have access to benefits, to ensure that we're supporting farmers in ways to get food out to folks that are food insecure. And so, you know, on one hand, I'm frustrated, and we had the panel this morning about kind of polarization, but I think there also is this real opportunity for think differently about what we can do with government. So a couple more things before I let everybody else talk. There's a government piece of this moment that we've come through with COVID. There's also the reality that we've come through this global health pandemic, and what you should know, if you're across the United States and across the world, there are likely organizations like ours that are part of the charitable food network, part of the safety net system. And so but we're not your we say you're not your mom's food bank. Back in the day, food banks said, take any food that you had in your pantry that you didn't really want, we'll give it to anybody, and people should just be happy to get it. Food banks aren't operating that way anymore. Our organization actually started as a food rescue organization. And the stat was that if you took half of the food that was thrown out in this country, you could feed all of the people, right? And so we know that we're really concerned about global warming, and we understand about kind of the importance of kind of how food waste contributes to that. So this opportunity to think about food rescue with food banks like ours, but also what's happening coming through the global health pandemic and the way food banks are doing their work is we're thinking more about nutrition security, not just feeding people. And so for us, that means we put out what we call our good food policy. We're challenging ourselves, first and foremost, to increase the nutritional value of the food we're providing to people. So we are purchasing fresh produce for people. That's what people want. We're purchasing lean proteins, purchasing and sourcing healthy dairy foods for people. We also are really pushing ourselves to provide culturally responsive food. We realize that the world that we live in, the place even in the greater Philadelphia area, is very diverse. A couple of blocks from my food bank, there are multiple Asian languages spoken. And so we're providing more variety of food. We're also thinking about locally sourcing that food. So supporting farmers that are local farmers, minority-owned, women-owned farmers, to get that food right from those communities into the hands of people. And finally, we're thinking differently about access. We want to make sure that the time and place that people are accessing the charitable food network makes sense for them. We got folks that are working, we can't only have a pantry open at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, right? We also are doing more home delivery. We realize in this COVID moment, we're delivering food to seniors with programs like DoorDash, but also through volunteers. And so for us, what I think, two messages. One is I think we really need to talk about what is government's role as we're doing innovations on our side to really scale up. But then also we absolutely have to think differently about providing people with foods, the tastes and flavors that they want that are nutritious and delicious.
Excellent. Well, I mean, that's we'll dive a little bit deeper into that a little bit. But Heidi, your program that you have really addresses that issue of what are the greatest challenges we have with global food insecurity and how you're dealing with it in a very unique way. It's a very difficult area. Maybe you can kind of talk about what the challenges that towards food security that you saw and how you started, maybe a quick description of how you started trying to deal with that.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for inviting me as a speaker. My dear friend and mentor, Skip Rhodes, was the one who invited me. So I'm fifth generation Marin County. I live on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, if I can help anybody about it. But just to set this in context, growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area. You may have come from other parts of the world and think of stereotypes, but what was passed down through generations to me is this is really the city of peace. And there could be no more important time for us to be gathering in discussion of peace on earth than where we are today. Okay, I think we all know without even repeating the atrocities going on, but I am so honored and inspired by the people that I've met in this room. I've been in many conferences in my life, and these are some of the most brilliant minds that I believe deeply from the heart of San Francisco, the city namesake of St. Francis, can make a difference in the world. The United Nations, we talked a little bit last night about the UN Charter being signed at the War Memorial, the Green Room, but preceding that, the vision of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt after the worst World War II was to gather the world so never would there be these atrocities. He didn't deem them to gather under a conference room. He selected Muir Woods across the bridge, and he dubbed them as the temples of peace to remind people to respect nature, for every circumference of a tree represents a year of life. He died the month before, but on May 19, 1945, the original delegates of the United Nations gathered under these temples of peace. And if you have time, please go see Muir Woods, because if you walk halfway through, there's a little tiny black and white picture, which we should all manifest today with the tools of AI and remind people of the roots of peace that began in the San Francisco Bay Area. So that is the context. And again, I graduated from Berkeley in the 70s. Peace and love was in our hearts. I'd like to wake up a few of my friends and remind them that wasn't just a cliche, but we got to get down deeper peace in our one world that we share. And I was a CNN reporter, producer in the Soviet Union, trying to bridge borders for peace between U.S.-Soviet relations. Had my own television news company, diagnosed with cancer, fourth stage, and I think anybody who goes under the knife, you make a little prayer between you and your maker. For me, it was, dear God, grant me the gift of life and I'll do something special. I had a 1, 3, and 5-year-old at the time, and 8 years later went back to the doctor and, came up in with tears. He couldn't talk. I said, just get it over with, say this. And he said, you have a miracle, you're pregnant. So I have 4 children now, and they're now 40, 38, 36, and 28. But where I'm going on that is that when I was holding this little infant in my arm, I was watching Princess Diana walk through those fields, not only in Angola in January 1997, but in Bosnia-Herzegovina, a month before she died. And I was just appalled to learn as a mother that there are 60 million landmines silently poised in 60 countries. And the children couldn't walk and hike Mount Tam or run the beaches of Stinson without risking their lives to lose their life and limb to a landmine. Cancer's a landmine. We don't know when any of us are going to step on it, right? And landmines are a cancer of the earth. And I took it on. And despite people saying, hey, can't do this, you can't do world peace, it won't work, you're just one mom. Watch me, guys. Have our fight words. So fast forward, I was asked by the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco to host a group of people in my home. From my heart, from coming through me rather than from me, I lifted my glass to the Consul Generals of Norway, Germany. May the world go from mines to vines. Killing fields into vineyards, blood into wine, swords into plowshares. And you could hear a pin drop. It was September 21st, 1997, and I took that out of the living room of my home to begin my diaspora. What could I do in my backyard? Well, it was harvest time, and I thought of the Napa Valley and the vineyards, the beautiful scent of the grapes, the harvest, and to imagine that there were farmers around the world who couldn't harvest their fruits. That 60 million landmines in 60 countries existed, preventing a child from picking flowers as they repatriate, or a farmer from farming their land. A soccer ball out of bounds, and a child loses a life or limb. The hatred continues on for generations. The Vietnam War, that was my generation, defined it. Today in Palm Tree Province, former DMZ, 80% of the land today is contaminated by landmines, exos, and cluster munitions. We are working there to train 10,000 farmers to grow black pepper on the former battlefields. We started in Croatia. We brought Mike Grgic, to his beloved homeland in January 2000. It was the first month of the new millennium, and as a cancer survivor, I didn't want to go to Hawaii or Tahiti. I wanted my children, in case I didn't live forever, to know that their mother had footsteps for peace and was a woman of substance. So when I went to Croatia and saw what I had only read about, what landmines do to humans, to feet, to arms, to eyes, I came back to Marin County, and it was very, very hard, to be honest, to come back and not care about landmines. We've got to get them out of the earth, and with Mike Grgic and coming back with over 400 Napa Valley vintners, we proudly raised the funds to demine a country of 1.2 million landmines in Čestamale, Čestavelika, Livenje, Baštica, Čestamal. And today I can proudly say Croatia is one of the top tourist destinations in the world. So peace is possible if we put our intentions, our minds, and our pocketbooks to it. So Minds to Vines was actualized there, and then the September 11th attacks occurred, and I pivoted from there to Afghanistan. And this great woman here, raise your hand, works in Kandahar, so we were able to talk shop. She works with UNICEF, and the seriousness that Afghanistan is conversely not only the most heavily mined country in the world, but it is the Garden of Central Asia, and 80% dependent upon agriculture for jobs, and 97% unemployment. Now, for political reasons, we've really frozen our investment there, but it's the innocent footsteps, the innocent children who suffer. So we've worked around the world. We've turned minds to vines, not just grapevines. I can go into it later. I don't want to talk too much, but this is the time that with the AI people that I talk to, my vision here in talking to all of you is let's use the tools of technology. Let's imagine a world where we eradicate landmines from the face of this earth, the face of this earth. 30% of Ukraine today is mined. And we just turn on the TV and wonder, what happened today?
Farms.
All farms, the breadbasket exactly of that feeds not only Europe, but the domino effect of North Africa. And what we are witnessing unspeakably, don't pick on any side for me. A landmine carries no flag, it knows no color. But what's happening in the Middle East right now is carnage, and I think we need to do something small for peace. To me, my part of a mother and 7 grandchildren, the removal of a landmine, the planting of a grapevine or any seed of life for future generations will not only produce the fruit to provide the nutrition for healthy minds and bodies, but that same tree planted will emit carbon credits into the earth and restore the lungs of Mother Earth. So I just challenge all of you, ask you to join me. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I think together we're forming partnerships, but demine, replant, rebuild, and it's a value chain, it's a business model for peace, and that's my story.
It's a wonderful thing, Heidi. I mean, just being able to hit it on both ends. You're basically removing that death, and you're bringing back life and food for the future. And I think it's a wonderful thing, and we look forward to talking more about that here today. Shridhar, I'd like to get to you as well and talk a little bit about your program. 2 million students are fed every day a meal that not only gives them nutrition, but also helps them get an education. And maybe a little bit about the power of that program that you have and how that helps fight that food insecurity and builds a better world.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be sitting next to Heidi, Loree, and John. Okay, such accomplished people. Akshaya Patra means a vessel which can give unlimited food. Akshaya means infinite, Patra means vessel. It's a Sanskrit word. Before I tell about the program, We started in the year 2000 with just 5 schools and 1,500 children. And we had a grand vision to feed 1 million children by 2010. And it so happened that we reached this mark in 2009, 1 year before. So I was we got a lot of awards and accolades, a lot of appreciation. But I was very curious to know what happens to the life of a child who gets a meal and an education. So I got this boy, he was a grown-up guy, from our first school. I used to 5 schools we started. This boy, 6 foot tall chap, he came with a white envelope in his hand. And when he walked into my office, I asked him, can you tell me about yourself? So he said, I was son of a daily wage earner, security guard, father was security guard, getting about 10 days a month salary. And I think at the time it was $2 a day kind of salary. Family of 6. So I gathered guts and asked him, how was your academic performance in the school? So he said, I used to barely get 40% marks and failed in the class almost every day. And I asked him, what happened after the Akshaya Patra program came to your school? So he said, my attention span went up. I was able to study well, play well, work hard. 40 became the very next year 60. 60 became 80. And in 10th grade, he scored 92% marks. Okay? And he remembered that in 11th and 12th, we gave him a scholarship of 5,000 rupees, which is, I think, $7? No, maybe $70. Okay? In today's rate. And with that, he studied 11th and 12th and went on to do BTech in computer science. Got 97% marks in 12th, went on to do BTech in computer science. Scored first class with distinction. And the envelope which I got was an offer letter from India's leading multinational firm with a starting pay 40 times of his father.
Oh, wow.
Now that's the power of meal and education. You asked the question, John, what can be done for food security? You know, food security or insecurity is man-made. That we should know this. We have made this. Okay? And this problem has to be solved permanently. From the root. You need to solve it from the root. Now that can be done only and only if the future of this world, our children, they get educated and they are well fed. So that was the vision with which Akshaya Patra started, with the vision that no child in India will be deprived of education because of hunger. 5 schools, 1,500 children. Then we started getting applications from different schools. Why are we feeding only those schools? Why not our schools? So we didn't have any resources. So we got, one day wisdom dawned on us and we opened the application. There was a request for 100,000 children in the Silicon Valley of East, that is Bangalore. Now how do you feed 100,000 children? So that gave us the insight that we should use technology to feed so many children. India is a large country, right? So we saw boilers being used in industries. So we said, why can't we use boilers to cook large amount of rice and then to soup for chili and vegetables? So we set up India's first decentralized kitchen infrastructure in the not-for-profit sector. We started with 30,000 children and started using steam boilers to make rice. That was a frugal innovation which we did. So one was centralizing it, second was frugal innovation. Then we were giving a preparation called khichdi in India, which is like lentils, rice, vegetables, butter mixed, and kids were loving it. And after 10 days, the consumption dropped. We found out, we were surprised, these are hungry children, why are they not eating? So when we researched, we found out children in Bangalore don't eat khichdi or the preparation which we are giving for lunch every day. Just because they were hungry, they were consuming the food. that gave us the third insight that just because these are poor children, we should not give what we want to give. We should give what these children would have eaten if their mothers had money, resources. Then we said every day the menu should change, and we will give them once a week dessert and not tell them which part of the week we are giving dessert. Because looking at the dessert, the kid will come to the school. And another very unique thing about Akshaya Patra is there is no processed food. There is no Pepsi, no Coke, no chips, no McDonald's. Every day it is scratch cooking. One of the principles what we follow is, as I mentioned earlier, what the kid would have eaten if her mother had resources. So then we started getting applications, then we started using technology. We built the world's largest kitchen in Hubli, which can feed 250,000 children, cooked to consumption in 6 hours.
Wow.
So the point which I'm trying to make is, if you have to solve a problem like this, it has to be solved with scale. A lot of ideas are there, a lot of good thinking, good people, a lot of ideas are there. But unless you use scale, unless you solve with scale, in a country like India, which has 110 million children who go to the government schooling system, you cannot solve the problem. And then we said we can't cover India as a whole alone. So we said let's create a scalable, replicable model. And today from 1,500 children, 5 schools, we feed 2.1 million children every day in 24,000 schools. And it is the world's largest. It is the world's largest not-for-profit run school meal program. And it gives me immense satisfaction. I was supposed to join the Indian Navy. The Commodore asked me this question, why do you want to join the Indian Navy? So I told him before I die, I should have done something meaningful. My mother didn't allow me to join the Navy, and I was a pet boy. So I respected her wish. And but when I look back, I think Akshaya Patra has given me that purpose for doing something for my great country.
And you know, it's 2 million children. It's not only that, but it's just getting them in there to school to, as you said in your story, to better their lives in the long run. And you know, during COVID, they saw overall global hunger went up about 100 million people worldwide, and it had a significant effect not just on those folks, but all the systems out there that went to supply all that increased need. And maybe Loree, you could talk a little bit on the level of Philabundance in the Philadelphia area as case study, how that COVID impacted your ability to source food as well as to get food out to the community and the demands that changed that you saw within the community.
Yeah, so I had the benefit of starting in this role in June of 2020, so right before COVID. There was a moment when we were paying attention nationally, locally, regionally, nationally, and globally to food security. People were liking it to the question. I think part of what happened in this country, and I think there was a question earlier about the media, part of what happened in this question is that we saw it on the news, right? Because of COVID, we had to take these operations outside. So people saw folks lining up outside of the pantry. People saw people lining up in cars and doing what we did, a truck to trunk. And so it became that much more evident that people saw it. What's interesting though, is that if you look over the last couple of years, and our data tends to be lagging when we look at the US Department of Agriculture data, food insecurity did not go up in the United States in the last couple of years, which is shocking, right? Like, we have to, like, how is that? How can that be true? Well, I referenced a little bit earlier, a few things happened. We definitely rallied a charitable food network, and I'm part of a national network. There are 200 food banks like ours across the country. We doubled our distribution from a 25 million pounds of food a year to 50 million pounds of food. We went from spending $2 million a year to spending $13 million a year purchasing. So kind of massive growth, really fueled by government to some extent, but just really generous donors to be able to do that. Why am I saying food security didn't go up? Right, the USDA, it didn't, with a couple of exceptions. families with children, people of color, and people in rural areas. And so I think that's the other thing kind of that's interesting about this moment to see. And so it's part of why, you know, I've been thinking about how government, what worked and how government works, right? And so the fact that we have from trade mitigation to these responses put more food out there for food banks to give out. The fact that we saw this expansion of the child tax credit, the fact that we saw this expansion of SNAP or food stamps, and we were able to mobilize with food banks and others, we were able to provide people with enough resources that many Americans thought that it was okay. So to me, the next question becomes, what's the scale issue and how do we continue this? It's why, where I wasn't starting a couple days ago to kind of having spent a couple of days with you all, how do we take these solutions that we've seen work and how do we scale them and make sure that those, or that we're able to really, to grow those? How do we take the innovations we're seeing and then how do we be able to grow them? I'll give an example. One of the innovations that we're working on, I mentioned that we're really focusing on nutrition security. We've been partnering more and more with health entities, healthcare providers, health insurance companies. And so we have a pilot growing out of this White House conference where we are looking at supporting birthing people, so women with gestational diabetes, and providing them with options around food, because we believe that if they have access to healthy, nutritious food, they and their babies will be happier. So what we're doing now, and thinking about kind of dignity, I love that you talked about what people want to eat, is that we're developing a model where they have a choice. That either they will have access to medically tailored meals provided by another nonprofit, not ours, one we partner with, healthy meals provided by us, because we also operate a community kitchen and a workforce development program, so we can provide healthy meals for folks. Fresh produce or other free groceries that we can provide, or vouchers for people to go to stores and buy the food themselves. And so we've already talked to government at the state, local, state, and federal level. And so what we're hoping will happen is that we will be able to show through this, and we've got an evaluator looking at it, that in fact, this leads to healthier communities, and that we can then sustain that with government funding that already exists through CMS, through the Department of Human Services, so through Medicaid and Medicare. So these dollars are already being spent. We want this to then be an allowable expense, so that I can no longer have to just simply rely on the private side of things, but government dollars that are already there can then just be redirected to support folks and support health in communities.
Let me follow up real quick on a quick question. As you go through and really transform these communities by putting in healthy food, and I'm going to follow up a similar question to you, Heidi, but I want you to start, Loree. How do you see those communities as you get healthy food in there? What is the change that you see within that community? Do you see a significant change within the population as far as how they're addressing the world and facing the world around them?
We haven't seen it yet, right? And so I think we're seeing it on an individual basis.
Right.
And so we have examples of work we've done or work that sister organizations have done that we're seeing positive health outcomes for individuals and communities. That, and research shows that. We're also seeing, and research tells us, that when we give people access to healthy food, that's what they're choosing. And so we believe that it'll have a larger impact on a wider community.
So it's not the stigma that it's these disadvantaged communities don't want healthy food because they don't like it. It's just that they don't have the exposure to it, is what you're saying.
And I'm gonna say more than exposure, I'm gonna say access.
Access. Okay.
And more than exposure, even access. And so, you know, what I often talk about is I have friends of all kinds of, to give an example, years ago I worked in government and we were doing a project around around co-sleeping. There were a lot of co-sleeping deaths in the city of Philadelphia. And so we had this thought, we're gonna go educate people, and it really is cultural, and people just don't know. Well, interestingly, my best friend at the time, her mom was a doctor. She was her mom's office manager, college graduate herself, and her husband was an OBGYN. They had a baby, and guess where the baby was sleeping?
In the bed with them.
In the bed with them. And so I say that to say, and we all know people of all socioeconomic backgrounds who are not the healthiest, who don't make healthy choices, right? And so I definitely want us to make sure we're thinking differently about that, because what research again will tell us is that when people have access to it, they will make those choices. Like I really know better, and sometimes I don't make good healthy choices for myself. But yes, we are thinking about some of the work that we're doing beyond the simple food banking side is how do we support and empower communities. And so we have walked communities with members and said,
Where are you getting food from? What are these issues? People talk about food apartheid. Where do you have access to food, and how can we support them in that way? So for us, as a food bank, we're looking at how we're providing things like, say, a mobile pantry for people and bringing the food to people. And then we're also partnering with, as I mentioned with that other program, food vouchers, we're partnering with grocery stores. At the end of the day, I want communities to thrive, and I want them to have all kinds of resources. I don't simply want to come in with free food and then the stores can't operate. When we're advocating and talking about SNAP, I talked about this kind of this supplemental nutrition assistance program, those dollars going away. What that actually meant, a couple things about SNAP in this country. For every meal that a food bank like mine provides, 9 are provided by SNAP. Right, and this is why I keep talking about kind of the power of what this kind of resource can be. The other thing is that we saw that just for those emergency allotments, when those went away in the state of Pennsylvania, that meant $2 billion in a year. $2 billion in a year that went out of the community, right? So that's an economic impact. So I tell people, if you don't care about the people, if you care about the economy, you're gonna think about kind of, how it's important to have that kind of access for people. And I think that if we're providing people with the tools in there, I think back to what the young lady was saying earlier about the, systematic issues. As we begin to address these systematic issues, I think we're gonna see healthier communities and kind of economically sustainable communities in different ways when we're making these kinds of investments.
Loree, I had a point. How, it's such a nice thing you're doing. How can you replicate what you're in the other states of United States?
So the reality is it is happening in other states. And so I keep referencing, so we're part of a national network of Feeding America. There are 200 food banks like ours across the country. And many of the programs that we're doing, someone else has done, and we're kind of saying, oh, that's a great idea, let's do it, or we're the forefront of those. And so that's—
There's a platform on which you collaborate.
There's that platform. So we had a national conference that unfortunately I missed 2 weeks ago, but 2 weeks ago we gathered at least twice a year. Our whole teams are gathering, the CEOs, and then kind of different teams are gathering, and then we have like a great learning hub and online community. So we're sharing, and so the kinds of things we're seeing. So one of the programs that we're about to start is a kind of Amazon locker type food program, so that folks that are busy, they can have a special code on their smartphone, they can go and access that. That's being done in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So they've actually gone through and figured out the hard part of it. I can then take that program and do that. And so we are looking at those. So the mobile pantry idea, there are other food banks that are doing that in our area and across the country. We take those ideas from them and share them. So
why I'm asking this question is, in this sector, a lot of good work is happening, but collaboration is something that is missing. And I'm glad I met Heidi just before this conference. We're going to partner. Maybe try. I've got apples in India for Indian children actually.
Yeah, the collaboration is everything. I think that to me is the takeaway of this group. I mean, it's think locally, have it ripple across the United States. And then in the case of Afghanistan, we started working on Roots Peace. To be clear, we partner with others to do the demining. We are not a demining organization. We come in strong with the replanting, teaching farmers how to grow high value crops. And in the case of Afghanistan, we started in 2002 with funding from USAID and a rural Afghan marketing program. And we started planting the pomegranates instead of poppies in Kandahar, right? And Ghazni Wardak Logar apples, apricots, almonds, cherries, and Badakhshan. And we restored the garden of Central Asia, which Afghanistan is known, to this beautiful bounty and its sustainability for the farmers, its dignity. We planted, again, with the funding of our partners. I want to say thank you to my country, to the United States of America, for believing in the vision of an idea. But we planted 7 million fruit trees. Now, why the United States has pulled out, that is the sustainable piece that we have left for future generations to thrive. We need to be planting more and more and get a spring offensive. But the cool part is that in 2014, the Afghan agricultural exports averaged $250 million. None of the buyers from Reliance and Big Bazaar and Big Supermarket chains would take the risk, of course, flying to Afghanistan to do the trade deals. We took an innovative approach and flew the Afghan traders to Gulf Food, the largest food exhibition in the world, to Mumbai, to Delhi, and the deals were done. And then we needed to provide the cold storage refrigeration because the farmers, due to the war, 3 decades of war, would harvest the fruit in the hot sun, drag it to market on burlap sacks, and expect a meager profit. Roots and Peace came in and introduced the cold storage refrigeration, the access to new markets, and the beauty is we took it up to $1.4 billion by 2020. Now, we've had to freeze a little bit of that. There's a little regime change there, but I'm very proud to say Roots and Peace continues to work in Afghanistan. We are the longest continuously operating agricultural organization and woman-led. When you meet with the regime, I think I told you this story. They said, Mrs. Kühn, we don't look at you as a woman. We look at you as a mother who's feeding her children. So you have full permission to, and you have to understand cultures. Do I believe in various regimes? I will not pick on any one. but we serve the farmer, not the flag. And I think the beauty is what we're co-creating here at this conference is they had a beautiful cultural story, the Kabuliwalas. They were the fabled Afghan traders who, when the fruit was ripe, they would bring them to India, and the children would wait for these beautiful fruits. I'm Californian, I tell you, if you ever taste an Afghan pomegranate, oh my God, it's darn good. Aren't they the best? I mean, the pepper pomegranate, I've never tasted anything like it. But anyway, I'm not despairing a Central Valley farmer here.
I'll let it slide this time.
Political landmines, but I'll take you to Afghanistan. The two of us work there. We're going to meet there in Kandahar. I mean,
it's a plan. It's a plan.
It's a plan. We didn't go pomegranate tasting, but the collaboration. So the vision that we just had in the hallway before you all walked in is, what if we can get the Afghan farmers, the beautiful apples and apricots and pomegranates and spices, bring those Kabuliwalas into your food program, and an apple a day keeps the doctor away, and maybe the landmines out of the ground, so that apples if we can get apples to go down to Silicon Valley, maybe they can fund us.
I'm very glad to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, how wonderful to have something concrete come out of this conference, and ripple it.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
jump in there.
that's a key.
Yeah, just to jump in on that kind of collaboration, just kind of and the power of Eisenhower fellowships. We partner in Philabundance with so many Eisenhower fellows in the region, in a number of ways. So some of them are our funders. I will say that they're coming out as our funder fellowship fellows and trustees who fund our work. I saw Matt walk in the room from the Horticultural Society, and his program at the beginning of COVID started a program called Harvest, that inspired and encouraged community gardeners and individual gardeners to donate their excess produce. Because apparently when you grow things, I really couldn't. Well, but when you actually plant, you have excess produce. And so they've, I think, the first year donated something like 40,000 pounds to food pantries across the region for people, which was great. We partner with Sister Mary of Project Home, so they have a program for people experiencing homelessness, and they operate one of our pantries. We actually even partnered with Jane Golden from the Mural Arts Program. I think some people heard her speak yesterday. We just did a mural together that kind of highlights more than food and kind of the spirit of this work. And so we definitely we talked about nationally with our counterparts at food banks, but even within the Eisenhower network, we literally could not do this work without that partnership, whether it's an outlet of food, really a thought partner or a funder.
Loree, we are partnering with Audience from No Kid Hungry America.
Oh yeah, we partner with them. We buy
Share
from
was
them.
saying, and Akshaya is partnering next.
Yep. I should have mentioned too, that reminds me, I'm sorry. Another, I sign our checks. Another partner of ours is Common Market. It's actually a local kind of farm operation in the Philadelphia area, founded by an Eisenhower fellow. Woman of color, and so we're purchasing produce from her that's either that's sourced locally that we're then giving in the hands of
John,
families.
I want to make one point.
Please.
You asked about how do we solve this?
Yes.
Innovation is the key driver for this.
Yep.
So I give our own experience. For 20 cents, we give an unlimited meal. This is 15 Indian bucks. 20 cents. 20 cents, what do you get in United States? What can you get?
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. Not even a piece of gum.
And you come to India, I show you what we can give for 20 cents, and many kids take it home after they eat. So for 20 cents, a hot, safe, nutritious meal. So what I'm trying to make, the point what I'm trying to make is innovation, to frugal innovation, can solve this issue. And in our own case, we started in South of India. South of India consumes a lot of rice. And when in North of India, North Indian children don't consume rice. And in India, every 50-60 kilometers, the taste preferences changes. So when we went to North Indian children eat flatbreads, and we didn't know how to make them. How do you make 400,000 flatbreads with a rolling pin? You cannot make, right? 400,000 because if I assume a child eats 3 flatbreads, roti, what's called in India, so you have to make 300 to 400,000 in few hours. So we innovated a flatbread making machine. Okay, this man was an 8th grade illiterate guy, and he had a tortilla kind of a machine, and we worked with him. I have engineers from IIT working with me, so they worked with him and created a machine which can make 10,000 flatbreads per hour.
Oh my God.
And then we invested 30% more and created a machine which can make 40,000 flatbreads per hour.
Wow.
And we have a machine now which can make 60,000 flatbreads per hour.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say, as you increase the scale, your cost per unit comes down. We have a professor here, he will tell that, right? So innovation can really solve this. And frugal innovation.
Yeah, and I want to build upon your concept of innovation, if I may, but working in Afghanistan today, is extremely challenging, and especially for the women. I really want to express that. We as Roots Peace got coal in our stocking Christmas Eve when the Taliban announced that women couldn't work for international NGOs. I was on the call to our women who are continuing to work for us, but we have to find innovative ways of workarounds. So Roots of Peace, because the women are confined to their homes, they have to have what's called a mahram to escort them out. We brought in kitchen gardens into the home. We brought in baby chicks. The baby chicks grow, they lay eggs. They're protein for the children. The husbands go out and they sell the eggs in market. They come back, they're not violent with their wives because they have no hope or dignity, ability to feed their family. So I can say so proudly that because of this innovative approach, that since February 2023, we've trained 5,000 Afghan women with jobs and the ability to feed their family. Now this can scale, but we just don't hear these things in the news. We just hear, Afghanistan is bad politics for both. Let's put it behind us. It's the most short-sighted.
We need a nexus of good.
Yes.
And what better way to start than with food?
A pandemic for peace. Peace through agriculture.
Peace through agriculture.
That's my battle cry.
There you go.
Peace through agriculture.
Well, no, I'm loving the conversational aspect of this, the panel, because it really highlights the idea that it's a solvable problem through connection, collaboration, and innovation. As a farmer, one of the few in the United States, but and there's 2 of us up here that are farmers, but I wanted to ask what Heidi had alluded to, towards you as the source of your 40,000 flatbreads. You're talking about getting some apples. Let's talk a little bit about the sourcing that you have for that huge organization that you're running there, with giving the children all that food. How is it that you source all that food to make sure it's a sustainable operation, that you're not feeding them for 1 year or 2 years, but for perpetuity?
So John, great question. Currently when we feed 2 million children, there are 9,000 people who work in Akshaya. 95% of them are from bottom of the pyramid. I ask them when I go to our kitchens, the heart of Akshaya, why are you with us for the last 12 years, 15 years, 20 years? They say our children eat the same meal. Okay. So coming back to this, so the point I'm trying to make is, Akshaya Patra is run as a person whose mind is of a corporate and heart of a compassionate not-for-profit. So we try to make sure that we directly source from farmers, like John. Okay? And last year we sourced close to 4,000 tons of vegetables directly from the farmers. And by this we saved 30% of our cost, buying cost, because earlier the mediator was taking that money, the aggregator. And ours is predictable, right? What is not predictable at Akshaya Patra is fundraising. But what is predictable is spending. Okay? So we know, for example, a kitchen which has 100,000 capacity handles about 5 tons of vegetables, 7 tons of grains, 5 tons of pulses, and 5 tons of dairy every day. So it's predictable for us. So if you can tie up with the farmer and develop the farmer along with this, so we can create a circular economy, that's what Akshaya Patra is trying to do. So in this process, the farmer gets more, and Akshaya Patra gets at a lesser cost. So it's win-win, double whammy.
And that's money into the economy as well.
And exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And as I mentioned to you, if I save 1/80th of a cent, I can feed 4,000 more children for one whole year without adding anything to it.
Well, it's a skill that, you know, here domestically we can learn from. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just the pricing and being able to.
One more point, this scale also comes from focus. You know, when we became big, one big donor came and asked me, I will give you $25 million. Can you build toilets for this children? I refused the deal. I told him, first let me solve the hunger problem and then the toilet problem. Okay? Some people laughed at me. They said, $25 million you're throwing down.
Only bite so much off the apple.
So the point I'm trying to make here, John, is focus is key to scaling up.
Focus on things.
And simplicity. Keep it simple.
Minds to minds.
Yeah. Keep it simple. Food for education.
Yeah.
Can I describe Akshaya Patra in 3 words? Food for education.
There you go.
So we'll be at the Borlaug, if any of you, inviting you all to come. It's gonna be the 26th of October, in the heartland of America, but I think together we should have a battle cry for peace. And I think as Norman Borlaug was the father of the Green Revolution, I think we should hold up a horticultural revolution. I mean that, from all over the world, from the heartland of America to the world. In the heartland of America, so we create heartland all over the world. It's not just from the heart of America, but in all war-torn areas where people don't have access to food and they can't trust the land that feeds them. So anyway, your ideas.
Well, one quick thing, Heidi, for you is maybe you could expand just a little bit on, you've been at this in a number of regions for a number of years. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how the longevity of the project, you know, years after the conflict is over, you remove the mines and you put in the vines. Have you gone back to any of those locations and seen how it's transformed those areas and what it means to a community to have, you know, not only stable food supply, but stable employment?
It just, don't get me going on that. I mean, that's what keeps me going back to the minefields, is just coming back and seeing this beautiful, thriving farmland. And this week, I mean, case in point, this is a tough week. We have farmers in Afghanistan, in Herat. This is the harvest season. And in Herat, thousands of people have died through devastating earthquakes. And so they not only lost their lives, but their livelihoods, the harvest of the saffron. But one of the women were on the line to me, and she said, thank you. For what? What? She said, you know, my husband came home because of the desperation of the food security issue, and we have 6 children. We can't afford to feed them all. Our youngest daughter is 10. She's quite beautiful. We need to sell her.
Oh, yeah.
We need to sell her. And she said, I went to Roots of Peace. I got a job. I didn't have to sell my daughter. Thank you, Mrs. Kühn.
I mean, food security, it's a poison that is more than just
That's-
hunger, it's.
And how many
it's-
more
See, no
mothers?
AI will work.
No, not like
If
that.
you don't solve this
No, no.
issue.
But
That's
that,
right.
that was the one this week, and so many, you know, when I went to Croatia, children were tethered to poles, and I thought that was so barbaric, and, you know, I went back, you know, they looked and said, Mrs. Kühn, the whole area surrounded is a minefield, we let our children play, you know, it was like a macabre maypole, you know, they were dancing around, and I went back 5 years later, and, father was out there, you know, tilling the wheat fields, the children were running out there picking flowers for me, and, you know, and I ate dinner in their home with the food that grew from the former minefields, and it was just one of the most joyful
It is so
dinners.
satisfying, right?
Yeah, the flowers on the table, I mean, it just, I don't know, I come back then to Marin County
See,
and
no money
say,
can
we gotta
get
turn minds
this.
to minds, and
Yeah.
people
No
are.
amount of money can get this kind of a happiness.
No,
It's just so satisfying.
It's not only just rebuilding those communities, it's putting the, you know, full stomachs for students and bringing a transformational amount of nutrition to, you know, disadvantaged communities and giving them, you know, just that nutrition they need to have a healthier, wealthier life. going
And you're a
forward.
prominent farmer in California, so the people in this room who aren't from California know we have a very serious border crisis.
Yes.
But Roots of Peace is getting to the root cause about migration by going into Guatemala and helping the farmers. The soil is rich. The soil, the answer is in the soil and the soul, right? You're taking out the landmines from the soil and the hatred from our heart. But the average farmer in Guatemala makes $7 a day, right? And they make $20 an hour. So why are people coming to the border, right? We want to build higher walls, but we need to look at the root cause about migration and give the farmers not only the dignity, but the ability to access markets so they have high value crops. They'll stay home. They don't want to send their oldest child to take that risk up to the border, but they have to, again, because of food security. So, you know, different parts of the world, it's the same, you know, turn those guns into shovels, and as you said so eloquently earlier, John, is that, you know, they won't join nefarious organizations. They won't join ISIS or, the, you know,
Yeah.
they'll lead with a shovel and not the gun. And what is that beautiful saying? Isaiah, you said it, but I just, my closing would be, may they beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks, so that nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. That's Old Testament, all faiths, and just people with good hearts.
I would like to open it up to the public, unless if anyone had anything else to add before we open it up to public questions? No? No? Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
First of all, compliments to the entire panel. It's very inspirational, absolutely fabulous. Only I was just thinking how probably overall the best of the practices of respective countries would be known to the people at large in the globe. Because what Akshaya Patra is doing, at least we definitely aware of, but what we could hear out from you all, I think how probably that exchange of ideas, best practices is known on some platform.
I'll give you an example. You know, someone came up to me and said, why don't you patent what you have done in Akshaya Patra? So I said, I don't want to capitalize on hunger. Right? Recently, Professor, we had 5 women from Kenya visiting us, and they learned for a week what we do. They've gone back and started a 50,000 capacity kitchen.
Wow. Wonderful.
So definitely what Akshaya Patra is thinking of can be, in that was one of my Eisenhower fellowship aims as well, can we start a university where whatever we have learned and what we have unlearned, more of unlearned, okay, can be shared freely on an open platform, okay? So where we talk 3 things. One is fundraising, operations, and leadership. So, but definitely I agree with you. And this is a missing thing. There are a lot of islands of excellence. I didn't know about Heidi, to be honest. And so inspirational about Loree, what she's doing. So inspirational, actually.
I picked up the words, what you said is she's a women kabuliwala for
Absolutely.
you know.
I'm coming out with a story.
It is Kabuliwali.
Wali.
Wonderful.
your story is very inspirational and truly heartwarming. But my question is on food price. No? So a lot of you are doing work in terms of redistribution of food, but have you had any thoughts in terms of lowering food price for the rest of the market or the rest of the citizens?
Loree, you want to?
So I'm just pulling out like so for us, and even the way that we do our work, and there's a document over some of the inflation costs. So people often talk about, when people start nonprofits, you think about like wanting to put yourself out of business. I know that's something that's kind of cliche to say that, but I'll tell you a little bit about how I ended up where I am now. So Philabundance is known as a food bank, part of the social safety net, and what we're really known to do is we're providing free groceries to people who, because of economic issues, cannot afford it themselves, right? And so I heard about that. That's great. I was not interested in working at Philabundance. But then I heard that Philabundance also had a community kitchen. So Philabundance has a program that people that are low to no income can enter into a free program for culinary arts. It's a free 16-week program. After a period of time, there are internships. We work with them over 2 years and really help them get livable wages so they can sustain their families. Philabundance also works on root causes of poverty. We also do our advocacy work. And it's because of that side of the work that I actually even got into doing this work. And so when I think about kind of what we're really here to do and how we can think about putting ourselves out of business, what we're known for are all the free meals. I can talk about kind of free meals that we provided. We also have a community kitchen, have free groceries, and you've heard me talk about the volume that we're putting out. We're serving, there are about 500,000 people in our region who are food insecure. We're providing meals to 135,000 of them each week. So that's incredible. But at the end of the day, I don't want programs like Philabundance to have to exist. At the end of the day, I want people to be able to make choices that we make every day. I went to breakfast this morning. I ordered what I wanted at breakfast. I want people to have that same autonomy, that same dignity. So why I say that in terms of food pricing? We think about food pricing from the operational side of what it costs us to support people for the time that we do have to support them. And so a couple of things. When we saw inflation go up dramatically in the last year, what we saw, how it impacted us, is that we saw more people accessing the charitable food network. And so we were able to say, like, look at these inflation prices. I'm able to go to our supporters, be they private philanthropy or to government, and say, we have more people, we need more support so we can support them. In terms of what it also has an impact on our ability to source food. So you know well that especially during COVID, the last couple of years, we've had challenges with the food supply chain. That has had an impact on us and made it more expensive and harder for us to source food. So we've operated differently with more co-ops. We started in our region, a Mid-Atlantic Regional Co-op. We have a produce cooperative that we started that supports 27 food banks like ours up and down the eastern seaboard. And that's in the replicated other places. And we operate out of a produce market where wholesalers are accessing produce, and we're able to get it at a cheaper price and then sell it back to food banks. So we're thinking about pricing in that way. We're also part of this national collaborative where Feeding America will go to the large general foods or kind of other large companies to get food at a much cheaper price. So that's what we think about food pricing for how we get it to people. But ultimately, our goal is that people have enough resources themselves to be able to access food directly.
Is there a policy that you're pushing to lower food price, for example, in America? Like, is there a missing piece in the supply chain, or something that can be done to lower food price for everybody?
That's not what our work is. Our work really is about where we're advocating is additional resources supporting farmers to get free food in the hands of families. We're also advocating on the benefit side to ensure that people have access to existing benefits for government benefits and accessing them in an easier way. We're not in the kind of advocating around food pricing.
In India's case, what happens is the grains for a child are given to the government. So that gets controlled. And we are a public-private partnership. So for close to 50% of my running costs per child comes from the government. And 50% is what I raise. And India runs the world's largest school meal program, bigger than what is there in China. So, of course, in Akshaya, we don't lobby for reducing the food price, but I agree with what Loree said. I was speaking at one of the premier training academies of India, called the Indian Administrative Services, the top-notch. It is said that the most difficult exam in the world is the Indian Administrative Service exam. So there was 110 freshly minted youngsters were there. One boy stood up and asked me this question. In 2020, you are doing 2 million. What do you want to do by 2040? So I told him I want to close down Akshaya by 2040. We should be irrelevant. Because the whole idea should be to solve the problem, not continue to feed the problem.
Yep.
Yeah, in the back.
Heidi, I'm inspired by your work and curious about the process of getting somebody to come on board with creating kitchen garden or changing what they're growing, particularly if they were growing poppies as a profitable crop. Like what is that dialogue like, and what did it take to persuade?
It's the economics of peas. That's such an excellent question, because the misnomer is that an average farmer will make more growing poppies than they would pomegranates, right? Secretary Vilsack, Tom Vilsack, had on the back of his card a white paper that my husband had written. In the average Afghan farmer, it grows wheat, a low-value crop. They'll make $800 a year. They grow poppies, $1,200, and high-value crops such as grapes and pomegranates, $3,000 to $4,000 a year. So they make, just based on the economics, that transition to grow pomegranates instead of poppies. And when people, the farmers in these particular provinces see the success of another farmer, it's contagion, it's social contagion. And also another really important aspect, it's not reported on in the news right now, is that the Taliban have banned the growing of poppies. So we have a little window of time before to grow food and to keep that, because if you can't grow poppies and you're not training the farmers to grow alternative agricultural crops, you have starvation and massive starvation on the horizon in Afghanistan. The funding is being cut and frozen for political reasons, but tragically, what we're gonna see unfold there is just a disaster, unless we can see beyond the politics and really get down to helping people, having heart, having empathy. And Mohammed had said today on the panel, we need to think with our heads as well as our hearts. And somehow we're missing that, you know. And sometimes I say to my husband, the necktie just gets a little too high. It cuts off the blood flow. But anyway, he loosens his tie.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Quick question. I've been thinking a lot about, Vanessa Cooksey, 2016 USA Fellow, about technology. Can you talk about your experience and thoughts around farming technologies like hydroponics and greenhouse, and just, is that helpful or harmful?
I can talk a little bit about that. It's all part of a tool. When you're talking about farming, food production in general, it's a very complex ecosystem that you work in. So you have hydroponics and you have greenhouse growing. They all work as tools towards providing a consistent food supply. In the older times and areas that, unlike that you don't have as well of a transportation system, your food is really seasonal. You only get certain foods at a certain time, and you would work a huge amount of your life storing up food during harvest period to keep it during these cold winter periods. And so, greenhouses, hydroponics, and a whole host of other agricultural advances have created this ability for us to have year-round availability of fresh food, fresh produce, fresh everything, which in and of itself is a basis to open up innovation across the globe. So we were talking all about AI just not too long ago, and that can be a tool for food production, but really AI wouldn't even be possible if people had to spend their whole life just looking for food. I think, Loree, you were giving the comment that when you were on your trial of doing subsistence living, that all you would think about was food, and that's the mindset of someone that's hungry, is they don't have time to think about AI and innovating. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that experience and how how debilitating, for those of us that don't have food shortage in our life, how debilitating it can be to you, to your personal progress.
Yeah, so I did what is called a SNAP challenge a couple of weeks ago, and people often do this, and it is essentially trying to live off of what you would live off of if you were on food stamps. And so for us, that's $6 a day. So I only did it for 5 days, and clearly it was an exercise for me. And what people often do when they do this, and we have elected officials and other leaders who've done this in our region and across the country. I decided not to do this on social media. I think my communications people they kept scheduling times, they would video me. I'm like, yeah, we're not doing that. It really was, to me, I looked at it not unlike I look at fasting, something that's really personal and introspective. So it was a time for me to really reflect on what this experience was like for people that I get the opportunity to serve. And so one of the things that was really striking is I spent so much time thinking about food. And as I talk to people with lived expertise, this is one of the things I hear. I hear from mothers with children is that they spend an inordinate amount of time just thinking about where they're gonna get their next meal. It's how they spend all their time. And so even for me, a short period of time, I kept thinking which grocery store I go to. It was actually interesting to me, and I'm not sure if folks know, there's grocery store chains. There's this relatively new, inexpensive one called Grocery Outlet. The prices are great, I think, right? Grocery Outlet. But then a friend of mine, my colleagues, was also doing it. She sent me her receipt. She'd gone to Aldi's, and the prices were very different. So even there was such a difference even between what you got at Dollar Store, Grocery Outlet, Aldi's. So I spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about that. Other things that I found, and you can only say this in this context and not in social media, is, and I appreciate you said about people getting the same food every day. So I'm in Philly, you guys have all, Eisenhower Fellows have all been through Philadelphia. It's a foodie town, we're very proud of the food that we have there, right? So you get the variety of food. On the SNAP challenge, it was monotonous, there was no variety, there was no flavor. I made chili from one chili pack because that's all that I could afford. And so that meant there was no joy in the food, right? So again, foodie town. And I thought about the food in these restaurants that I get to go to. Many people providing that food were living a SNAP every day, right? And so they also were the ones that didn't have the ability to enjoy in the same way that we did. So that's true. The final observation, I shared this with right after. Oddly enough, I ended up sick. I ended up, not going into the office literally for 3 days after this experience. Now that could have been psychosomatic or could have been real. But I appreciate you bringing that up. So, there are many, as we do this work, and I appreciate the innovation, I appreciate the intelligence, the collaboration, all of this here. Those of us that have decided to do this work, we do this work for people and on behalf of people. I think about what was said last night. It is important for me to always remember that, whether it is, at least we heard last night, how we're co-creating solutions for people. It's why I feel so strong when people say, oh, are we gonna teach people about this? We all can learn, but the reality is, this is, for us, food insecurity. People are not healthy, do not have access to food because of economic issues. And so I can, every day, and I'm fortunate, any given day, I get to help people every day with access to fresh healthy food, but I also get to work on the root causes. I also get to call on government to change the way it operates and to redirect resources. I also get to talk to companies about what their economic choices are. One of the other things that I'm really proud of, when I joined this organization, my predecessor had already decided to pay people a livable wage. So that's great too. So I get to run a workforce development program. I also get to pay our folks, and for us now that's $17 an hour entry level. Interestingly, just to now, that's a good side of it. Even with that, I will tell you all, in the last year, I have 4 employees that have lived in their cars, lived in a shelter where we ironically provide them food, or have come to work and people said, oh, what's going on with you? I haven't eaten in 3 days. So even with that, and so part of what I think the push for us is that we have to think differently about how to ensure that everybody has access to the resources they need so they can live in a way that they can, again, make choices for their families. I shouldn't be telling people what to eat every day.
Now, and just one last thing on that, and then we'll have time for one more question, is it's all part, you talked about the Farm Bill, and the Farm Bill has a lot of funds that go towards providing support funds for food and whatnot. But The other half of it is the support that goes towards agricultural production, because that's really the root that provides that food. And when you talk about how do you reduce, your price of food and overall, it's creating a very efficient and sustainable food production system that generates that food. And so, they work hand in glove. You can't have, one support system without the other. You can't grow the food without having the ability to give it to people, and you can't give anything to the people if you don't have the food being grown. And so when you talk about food security, and we talk about these important programs, and, it really starts from the soil, and it starts with those folks that are out there you're growing it. It starts with the folks that spend their time harvesting it, and then it ends with the consumer. But through that, it really goes through all of these processes, whether a consumer is wealthy or not, or on a program. We're all tied into that system, and when you talk about that food security, it's all part of that network. So we have time for one more question.
Well, thank you all for the discussion. More importantly, for the amazing high impact work that you're doing. This is really inspiring. I want to ask about technology as well. It seems like a few years ago there was a lot of excitement about and interest in novel ways of producing food. Right? You had plant-based companies like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat. You had like Just and all these various different ways of producing food. And the idea that we heard about was, well, this has the potential to create a lower cost, more sustainable, maybe more nutritious, some would say more ethical scalable food system. It seems like, particularly for Shridhar and Loree, if this came to be, this would really be impactful for your efforts. From the outside, it doesn't feel like that's really become part of the solution yet. I'm wondering, is that right? If so, why? And what do you think the potential of those types of new food innovations would be for the problems that you're looking at?
So it's interesting. So I have in my head, we got a chance to partner with Eric Oberholzer, this incredible thinker in this area, and he actually had in this area, I guess in Southern California, he started a group called Tender Greens, and then we ended up working with him with some things. This incredible chef, and what I've heard from him is that there are some innovations, but I think there are people who don't think that the solution is, and I should say, I have Impossible and Beyond Meat in my freezer right now. But what I've heard from folks like him is that may not be the solution for us on a larger scale, but I'll leave it to those experts to talk about. That said, I'll go back to what we talked about in terms of our good food policy and more nutritious food. Mm-hmm. One of the things we are providing more and more of, us ourselves, and we also have pantries that are a pantry that we work with called Garden of Health. We're increasingly trying to make available to people plant-based solutions, be they just fresh produce in general, but we also, if we can get Beyond Meat or whatever we're doing, we definitely make it available to people. I've not yet seen us be able to have access to it on a large scale, but I think that the greater minds are thinking about that work.
Just to add to what Loree said, world over, 2.5 billion tons are wasted every year. 2.5 billion tons. Okay, and definitely technology can be used to address this. And 1/3 of food get wasted at the source level itself. Lack of proper storage. In many developing countries across the world. So technology can definitely address this. And if this can be done, I think we can close our organization much faster. Okay? But technology can really help.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to thank everyone.
We had one question.
It's okay. Well, it's for the farmers, right? So I'm a farmer myself. I'm a China fellow, and my husband and I, we farm in Missouri. But the farming profession is the highest suicide rate of any other profession in the world, especially in India, where the Green Revolution really changed the face of smallholder farming. And I just wonder, we talk about trying to lower the price of food, but the farmer in the United States still only gets 12% of the dollar. And so I think less. And so, the farm bill is important, but it also perpetuates a system where larger farms win and medium farms disappear. So if you want to comment on that, I would just love to hear.
So what I would almost say is that Secretary Vilsack came through Philadelphia this summer. It was really hot there, sometime this summer. And I was really impressed with what he talked about. While I'm not a farmer, obviously we support farmers in a variety of ways, and we've also through some government supports and other supports. Like we just spent $30,000 this summer purchasing seeds for a small nonprofit called Farmer John, a young African American woman, food justice focused, so that she can get seeds so that she can grow food for us. But he talked about putting programs together where he had the ability, even outside of Congress, to really support smaller farmers. So you would know more about that than I do, but I was very impressed that he thought that very issue. He talked about his predecessor, not to be political, his predecessor saying, you want to grow, you just have to be, if you want to survive, you just have to be big, and he was trying to really, that's what he said, but he really is talking, the programs that he's laying out, and some of which were kind of, even our farm school was using, was really about supporting smaller and mid-sized farmers. I don't know if that, you see that's true for him, right?
You know, it's absolutely, I can't tell you how many personal friends I have that has some member of their family that was a farmer, you know, committed suicide based off of pricing that would ebb and flow. I mean, the truth of the matter, agriculture, at least in the United States, is you're a price taker. You are completely subject to the whims of the market. So what was making money one year will lose money the next, and you're leveraged so heavily that you'll lose the farm, and it's the culture of the farmer that the land is everything. And so when you lose that ability, and I know that's probably a big part of what Heidi deals with when she first shows up, is these farmers just devastated by the loss of their land. When you have that potential of losing the land, it's for anyone, it's losing who you are. It's worse than losing a family member in some cases for some of them. And it's also a personal letdown to their family, because they're supposed to be providing for them, whoever it is. And so the potential for that suicide is very high. The Farm Bill can help those small and growing farms in the United States just by the sense that it has programs. The problem really is in education and access, that a lot of the small farmers don't realize the programs that are available to them or have the ability to navigate the very complicated process to gain access to some of those programs, and that gives the advantage to those larger entities or those that are more engaged to get a hold of it, to get a hold of those funds.
There's history of discrimination with the USD.
Well, there's some of that, but today it really comes down into this mindset that if you're a farmer, you're busy farming. You're not busy trying to navigate some political access to a program, so you got to spend your time getting your crop in. And so the hope is, and that's the conversation, is to get more of that access and education and to help those small farmers come in, and by giving them some sort of preference and point skill to encourage that and hope. But the truth of the matter is, as you are price takers, it's really the business of the risk that you're in, and it's a sad reality, but it's also something that we can manage. And I mean, as far as India is concerned, I'm sure there's a lot of similarity in that, and the tie to the land, which leads to that devastating personal attack if you lose the farm. But that aside, we are running over time, so I just want to point out, one thing out of this whole meeting is what I took away from it, and I hope everyone in this room takes away from it, is while the problem of food insecurity and hunger throughout the world is a very substantial problem, I think it is eminently solvable with good cooperation and collaboration. Thank you, everybody, and I just some housekeeping. The buses for the dinner at the Asian Art Museum, I believe, are leaving at 5:30. Out of the lobby, so please make sure you catch those buses. I'm sure it'll be a good dinner and socializing. And for anyone that wants to continue the conversation, I know that the panelists will either at the dinner or later will be happy to talk to you more, because it's something they're passionate about. So thank you all.